letting people know that you're allowed to fail. It doesn't mean that everything you try is going to work. I tell people, I expect most of what we try is not going to work. It's okay. That doesn't mean that, you did something wrong. We try different things because that's how you grow and that's how you learn. That's how you can win in the marketplace. So I think the first thing was changing the mindset that if I try something new and it doesn't work, I'm going to lose my job. So giving people the comfort and the confidence to step out and do something different, I think is a big part of that culture.
Hello and welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Hodling. Today's guest is Robert Sanchez, the chairman and CEO of Ryder System, a leading transportation and logistics company. With more than 50,000 employees, hundreds of thousands of trucks, and over $13 billion in annual revenue. Robert has been with Ryder for over 3 decades and has served in roles as CFO, COO, CIO, and other senior leadership positions before becoming CEO 12 years ago. Under his leadership, Ryder has transformed from a fleet management company into a broader transportation and logistics company. In today's conversation, we'll discuss many of the incredible strategic shifts that he's led at Ryder, how he's built a people-first and safety-first culture, and the lessons that he's learned as a leader along the way. Robert Sanchez, welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So this morning, I was on my traditional morning run, preparing and thinking about today's podcast, and no joke, a Ryder truck drove by. It was not the iconic yellow that I remember from my youth, but I saw the kind of big white Ryder truck, and it was a sign from above about how important today's conversation will be. So I want to start with a little bit about what Ryder is. I think a lot of people listening will know the brand, know the name, but they might think about it as just a truck rental or a trucking company, but it's really so much more. It's really the backbone of so much American commerce. So if you could just give a quick overview, what does Ryder do nowadays?
So yeah, most people know Ryder for our iconic rental trucks. They used to be yellow, now they're white, but ultimately we're a company that's been around for 93 years. And truck rental is about 10% of what we do. The other 90% is a little different. We group them into I would call it 3 types of businesses. One is our fleet management business, of which truck rental is a part of it. But you can consider that to be the outsourcing of a truck fleet for a business. Everything we do is business to business, so B2B. So a business can go out and buy their own trucks and worry about doing their own maintenance, or they can come to Ryder and we'll equip you with a fleet of trucks. We'll lease those to you. So we buy them, we lease them to the customer, and we do all the maintenance. And at the end of the life, dispose of those vehicles. We have a fleet of about 130,000 of those lease trucks. And then we have another fleet of about 40,000, which are the ones that you see that actually say Ryder on them. Those are the rental trucks. The other lease fleet, you wouldn't know it was Ryder. It has our customer's logo on it. So that today is about 40% of our business. The other 60% of our business is more of a supply chain dedicated transportation. So if you think about fleet management as the outsourcing of a fleet of trucks, this is the outsourcing, dedicated is the outsourcing of a truck and a driver. So I want you to not just take over the maintenance of my trucks, but just do the whole thing. Operate my private fleet for me. It's called dedicated transportation. And that part of our business today is about 20% of our business. And then the other 40% of our business is broader supply chain activity. So it's the outsourcing of not just a truck and a driver, but we run warehouses. We run over 100 million square feet of warehouse space and distribution centers for our customers. Transportation networks that include trucks, not just Ryder trucks, but third parties that we manage for our customers. We have an e-commerce fulfillment business where we deliver product to the end consumer. And we also have a final mile delivery. We also deliver big and bulky type products to consumers. So think about that as kind of port to door services of anything that you need to get your products to your customers, Ryder can do for you. So we're about $13 billion of revenue. We have just over 50,000 employees. We've been, over the years, global. We have focused the company more in North America over the last several years. So we're North America focused, US, Mexico, Canada. And again, doing everything that is needed for companies that have broad supply chains. Any activity that they have, we can do for them.
Congratulations on this expansion over the course of the last many years into multiple different product lines. Congratulations on the company's growth. In the last 5 years, you've doubled the stock price. So you've done a really great job as CEO. You're leaving on a high note. I know you're going to be retiring in a couple of months. So congratulations on an incredible 12-year run. I want to talk about the decision to be a multi-product line business. What prompted that, and how did you pull off that transition? A lot of companies, a lot of CEOs struggle with this decision. I want to hear your thought process and your execution path.
Well, this is a journey that I would say predated my time as CEO, began many years ago. Ryder's been around for a long time. This company was started by a gentleman named Jim Ryder back in the 1930s. And he started by buying a truck and delivering building materials to job sites here in South Beach. Think about that during the Great Depression. He built up the company through acquisitions, got into a lot of different product lines, made us a public company. We've been a public company since 1955. Stock symbol R, by the way, easy to remember. And in the 1980s, like many companies, we diversified, and we were in, I think, 12 or 15 different businesses. We owned an oil refinery. We were in the insurance business. We were in the school bus company. We were the largest school bus company in the country. We owned Travel Centers of America, so we had truck stops, aircraft leasing, aircraft engine overhaul business. So we had really diversified into a lot of businesses, like many companies did, became a holding company. In the 90s, we realized it was really difficult to be good at all those businesses. So we narrowed the scope of the company down to initially 2 businesses, of which the bulk of what we did for a long time was this truck leasing and rental business. That was really, I think at the end of the 90s, was probably about 80% of the revenues of the company. So over time, we said, we got this logistics and dedicated transportation business, which is actually a good business. It's more value added. It's a lot harder for us to do. It's hard to get good at supply chain and get good at being able to do this across different industries. So I would say that was a multi-decade process of us learning how to execute and how to be good at this. What I've kind of pushed over the last probably 6 years over the line was actually making those businesses the majority of the company, because it went from being, if you go back 6 years, those 2 businesses were about 40% of the company, and they are now 60% of the company, a little over 60% of the company. And that really required us to really focus on accelerating the growth of those businesses while still continuing to grow this good truck leasing and rental business that we're leaders in. It's really finding ways to also accelerate the growth in those other parts of the business, which has really helped us, I think, expand our relationship with many of our customers.
So you mentioned earlier that it used to be a global business, and now you've really focused on North America. So it's been an interesting story at Ryder as you've expanded different product lines, you've narrowed, but now you've kind of re-expanded. You've had global expansion periods, you've had focus periods. Talk me through that decision to be, a 93-year-old company that really operates in 3 markets. Talking about that path.
Yeah, it's a journey. I mean, we went through in the 90s and the early 2000s global expansion like many companies, right? You wanted to be in all these different parts of the world where there was emerging markets or where we felt that the services that we provided we could transfer. I think what we learned over time was that it's, what we do for a living in any of the 3 businesses doesn't always translate well across borders. The structure in not every country is set up the same way. Also, to be really good at what we do globally is very difficult. We want to be really good at what we do in North America, and we feel that there's a very large market still to be had there. So we were in South America, we were in Europe, we were in Asia, we were in the UK for many years, and over time really realized we could be a larger company, more profitable company, and better serve our customers if we narrowed geographically our focus to North America. Because, as I mentioned, we're in the transportation logistics outsourcing business. Everything we do, a customer can do on their own. Well, the good news is that in these 3 segments that we're in, anywhere from 75 to 90% of those markets are still not outsourced. So people still do it themselves. So we pivoted the strategy to say, look, forget about expanding. We've got plenty of business here. Let's just pivot. Let's just chip away at the segment of the market that hasn't outsourced yet. And we could really grow this business for a long time. So that's been the strategy. It certainly has worked over the last several years. Of allowed us to become we're actually a bigger company than we are today than we were back when we were globally, and significantly more profitable.
Over the course of the last many years, the logistics space has become very tech-enabled and tech-driven. And I think one of the reasons you've been so successful at Ryder is you've embraced innovation. You've embraced technology platforms that help to facilitate a lot of this logistics. You even have, I think, an in-house venture capital fund that's investing. So talk me through your decision to build, buy, or license innovation. When you hear Ryder, you don't think this is an AI company, this is a technology company. But you guys have invested in and have built a lot of technology solutions. So talk me through your build, buy, or license decisions, and maybe if there's one or two products in particular that you would call out.
So it's been, like I said, we've been a 93-year-old company. If you go back 10, 15 years, we were probably still selling the same products that Jim Ryder came up with back in the 1930s. So, clearly with the changes going on in supply chain, we realized we've got to be able to innovate. Not only technology, we've got to innovate new services, new products. And we had identified three what I would call potential disruptors to our business. The first one was the next generation vehicles. So electric trucks, autonomous trucks. We called it the Tesla effect. But what's that going to do to our business and our model, which is primarily maintaining and providing diesel internal combustion type vehicles. The second item was around Amazon and the shift towards e-commerce. We were good at delivering products to retail stores, but didn't have that last leg to the home. How's Ryder going to compete if that really, or when that really takes off? And the last one was the Uber effect, this whole asset light sharing of assets that we own trucks and we maintain. What happens if somebody comes in and says, I can create a virtual rental business with other people's trucks? So we focused on addressing each of those, saying we're not going to put our head in the sand and hope it don't happen. Let's run out and try to do it ourselves. So we created, for example, around electric trucks, we created a product, a mobile maintenance product. So most of our maintenance of our diesel trucks are done at one of our 800 locations. Well, if it's an electric truck, it's probably going to require somebody to just go to where you're keeping your electric trucks and just do the maintenance there. It doesn't require as much heavy work. So we entered that market with a product called Torque by Ryder. So that's a product that we're continuing to grow. Even though electric has sort of slowed down, we still think that's a very good product. There are customers who prefer that mobile service. Around the Amazon effect, we were not in the e-commerce fulfillment business. We bought a couple companies to really give us a foothold into that business and allow us to provide that final mile delivery for our customers. And then around the Uber effect, rather than wait for somebody to create a virtual rental business, truck rental business, we created our own. It was called Coop by Ryder. And what we did is we took idle trucks from customers and allowed them to rent it through this platform. That business, we've pivoted more towards trailers because we found that it was a little bit more complicated, but that's been a probably 7-year journey as we've learned. But it's been being able to exercise that muscle of innovating with new products and new technology that's important. And then as part of that, we also opened up this venture capital fund to give us visibility to what are the new technologies that are coming out. And one of the offshoots of that was there was a company called Baton out of the Bay Area. It was a group of really smart people who were developing a software to optimize the delivery of truckloads into a customer, especially the big box customers, so that the truck drivers wouldn't have to be waiting when they got to do the delivery. We got involved with them. We thought, these are smart folks. They're building a really cool tool. I don't think it's the right application, though. There's a lot more to that, but I think there's stuff they could do for Ryder. We touch a lot of freight. We've got a lot of customers. So we ended up buying that company and made them our in-house technology lab. So that group now used to be 5 people, or now about 40 people, and they are writing software for Ryder and our customers. So where our strategy historically had been to buy software off the shelf and use that to run our business, we now have our own software. One of them, an example is something called Ryder Share that gives our customers visibility to all of their freight that's moving within the Ryder network. And then it's allowing us to optimize across the customer and across our other customers. So that gives us a much more powerful story in terms of when we approach a customer, being able to provide something that our competitors can't.
Yeah. I want to ask a very tactical question about how you identify these threats and then the kind of resources marshaled on each of them. I think it was, very impressive. You have the clear three. These are the three threats. These are direct response to each of them. Do you have a chief strategy officer? Is that you and the board? Are you like one day a month you hole yourself up in a room and rub your temples? Like what is the process to really clearly identifying these? How do you make space for, in Frank and Covey world, we talk about the important but not urgent, the quadrant 2 work and the time matrix. Like, how are you making space for that important but not urgent work? And then who is the team that you are organizing around these?
So we take the important but not urgent work very seriously. We have a strategic planning process in the company that we go through annually. And it's the management team working with the board to identify what's the vision for the company for the next 3 to 5 years. And as part of that process, we take an external view of what are the things that are happening in the industry. As the example with these 3 disruptors, if you will, we started off with a list of 20. We looked at 3D printing. Is that going to be a problem? We looked at a lot of different technologies that were evolving and how they could impact our business. We didn't want to be the Kodak of transportation where you wake up one day and you're obsolete. So it was part of a very methodical process that we go through each year. And it's not a one and done. We work through updating our strategy by doing this type of research. We present it to the board typically in the middle of the year. And then we continue to have readouts as the progress that we're making on these initiatives. So I think ultimately that's really what has helped us to really take a more progressive look at what are the things that we could do to improve our business model.
Continuous disruption demands leaders who turn uncertainty into their advantage. Franklin Covey's Insights Report, Where Are All the Great Leaders?, tackles diminished trust in fast-moving AI, revealing what it takes to develop strategic, adaptable leaders at every level. Grab your free copy from the show notes to drive growth amid unpredictability. And for these new product lines that you create, is it an existing business GM or owner who's taking them? Are you spinning out a new team and you're saying, hey, we want you guys to rent an office in downtown Miami in Brickell, and you guys are going to act like a startup that we're funding, you're going to have gates? Like, how are you very practically investing in that innovation?
Well, on some of the technology stuff, they stay within the structure of the company. The innovative stuff, the Torque by Ryder, for example, the Coupe, those we've typically have they still are part of Ryder, but we've kind of put them off in their own space, their own logos, their own practice, to give them the freedom to develop these things. Because, the Baton team that we acquired through a Ryder Venture team, they have their own office. They've kept the name Baton. It's a Ryder technology lab, but have continued to operate kind of within their own area, because I think it gives them a tie into the company, but still the freedom to operate more as a smaller product development startup.
Yeah, wonderful. So I want to move from talking about company strategy to company culture. You have, I think, 50,000 employees or so. You're dispersed throughout the country. It's a combination of kind of corporate jobs and maybe slightly more blue-collar jobs. How do you create a culture that speaks to everyone and really unites and connects for one Ryder?
Well, I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of at Ryder. I think we've been able to really create a really collaborative culture where everybody feels part of a team. It's something that we take very seriously, and I think it starts with the leadership team. Right? Is the most important. The first job, I guess, of a CEO is to get the right people on the bus, and how do I add people to this team who are going to be able to work well together, people that are trustworthy, because creating a trusting culture, I think, is how you get people engaged in being part of the team. So I've been very fortunate. I was able to get the right people on the bus, and at that point made my job a lot easier. But it was really about collaboration. And I'll give you one example. We have this truck leasing and rental business, which is the outsourcing of a truck. And then we have the dedicated business, which is the outsourcing of that truck, but also the driver. So you would think, logically, that if a customer is outsourcing their truck fleet to you, that eventually it might say, hey, why don't you take the drivers also? Well, for a long time, we had none of that. Not one customer out of 15,000 ever wanted us to also take the driver. I thought that was a little bit odd. So the issue was more internal. We didn't have the right collaboration across those teams. We didn't have the right incentive program for salespeople to share. So we made some changes years ago that opened up that floodgate. And over 50, 60% of the sales in our dedicated business now come from our fleet management business. And that was all collaboration. It was really creating the right incentives, creating the right culture. And I think if starts at the top, if the leaders of each of those groups get along and works together, the groups underneath them will feel open to doing that. If they don't, then you'll have the silos. So I think having that collaborative culture where people feel respected, people feel that the company has their best interests at heart and appreciates the work they do every day. I will not see 99.9% of our employees on any given day. They are out there, and I pray that they're taking care of our customers. My job is to make sure that they have the tools that they need to do that, and that they realize how appreciative and how important it is for Ryder and how appreciative we are for the work that they do. So having that message, continuously out there. We have an internal communication tool called Our World, where people can go on to social media. So we're constantly putting information on there that keep people connected. I go out once a quarter, once every couple quarters, and I do what we call on location, where I will go visit one of our operations in the field and explain to the rest of the company what we do in that location. Because if you're maintaining trucks, you may not know that we're also running inbound logistics for a big automotive company. So being able to get that communication of all the great things that we do in the economy also is an important part of making everybody feel like they're part of the bigger Ryder.
Yeah. You clearly have a mindset that is confronting status quo and not accepting complacency. And I think that is a really important mindset for the CEO of a company that's been around for 90 plus years like Ryder to have, because it's easy to get locked into the way we've always done it is the way we're always going to do it. Franken-Covey's Research Institute found that 87% of leaders find that disruption is something to survive rather than an opportunity to embrace. And you really seem like somebody who embraces it. How do you get that mindset that you have into the organization as a whole? And then how do you move from mindset to really collective action on disrupting your own processes and change management generally?
Well, I think it's making it a priority for the organization, right? And then also letting people know that you're allowed to fail. It doesn't mean that everything you try is going to work. I tell people I expect most of what we try is not going to work. It's okay. That doesn't mean that you did something wrong. We try different things because that's how you grow and that's how you learn. That's how you can win in the marketplace. So I think the first thing was changing the mindset that if I try something new and it doesn't work, I'm going to lose my job. So giving people the comfort and the confidence to step out and do something different, I think is a big part of that culture change that you need to in order to do it. And I think for me personally, it's a little bit of the fear too. Hey, I don't want to wake up one day and find out that nobody needs the service that I'm providing. And even though it's been needed for the last 90 years, doesn't mean it's going to be needed next year. So always being vigilant to what are the things that can really impact the business and can change your future, to me, says you should be on offense on those and trying to find those before everybody else does. Because if you can find them, then you're going to win in the long run.
So I want to now we've talked about the company's strategy, culture. Now I want to talk about you as a leader. I read a great article in Fortune about an early career experience you actually had with Franklin-Covey that altered your mindset and your behaviors and ultimately your career trajectory. And so I would love for you to share with our audience kind of what was it that you experienced that then changed the way you approach your work.
Without ever having spoken to you or any folks at Franklin, I've been a Franklin-Covey cheerleader for a long time. So whenever I talk about my story, I talk about this experience that I had. I grew up here in Miami. My parents are Cuban immigrants. I studied engineering at the University of Miami. Learned how to solve problems, I'd like to say. Then had a little startup with some folks that I had worked with, that I'd gone to school with. decided to go get an MBA so I could come back and do the startup. I ended up getting married. While I was in graduate school, I realized, well, it's going to be hard to do a startup. My wife was a social worker. We probably weren't going to be able to live off of her salary. So I better get a job doing something else. I wanted to go work in consulting. But the consulting job I got was in Chicago. My wife had never been north of Fort Lauderdale, did not like living in Philadelphia when we were in grad school, told me she wasn't going to go to Chicago. I needed to find a job in Miami, and that's how I ended up at Ryder. Ryder was the only company that offered me a job here in Miami. So I started off in the IT department, and being a technical guy, I think I was pretty good at like solving problems and working on technical things. I was not very good at being organized or managing things. And I had these yellow Post-its, and that's how I kept track of all my to-dos. And I usually would put them all on my computer screen, and then they would fall off, and I'd forget about it, or then I couldn't even read my handwriting. So an early boss that I had here at Ryder said, you should go take one of these time management classes. I think it's going to help you. And I always tell people it was a one-day class. It was the most important class I ever took in my life, because it really helped me to organize my life and to keep track of what are those things that were urgent and what were those things that were important, not only in my work life, but in my personal life. So my entire career, I've been here 33 years. I have been, maniacal about keeping track of what are the things I need to work on and getting those done, having my calendar, prioritizing things every day. I used to have the books, the little Franklin Covey books. I probably have like 15 years of those or 16 years of that. I went electronic. But it really allowed me, and I always tell folks here at Ryder that being able to have work-life balance is really important, but it's your own responsibility. And the way you do that is by being organized. Because we have 3 sons. Raising those boys with my wife is best job of my life. But being able to manage that along with all the demands at work, I think really was so important to being able to be successful at work. Because if you're worried about what's going on at home and you don't feel like you're doing it right, it helps you, it keeps you from thinking straight. So obviously with the help of my wife, who did a lot of the heavy lifting, but also being able to know that, hey, if I wasn't going to make their baseball game on Tuesday, I was going to make the Thursday one, and it's going to be okay. And knowing that I had that level of coordination and understanding in my calendar was really, really helpful. So again, a very important one-day class that I took probably in 1993.
I'm really happy to hear that Franklin Covey had such a positive effect on you and your career, and I'm sure that positive effect has cascaded through the leaders that you have worked with and mentored and guided over the years as well. So you're now coming to the end of your tenure as CEO, and I think in about 60 days you're going to be transitioning. You're going to be a chairman of the company. You've been chairman of the company over those 12 years as well, but you're going to be handing off the CEO reins to someone else. Knowing what you know now about the world, how would you have approached, not from a strategy perspective, but how would you approach the role differently personally over the last 12 years?
Well, I think a couple things, I guess. One is I probably would have more urgently focused on getting the right people on the bus. It turned out to be a process. Some of it is learning too, but clearly that's important. And then there was certainly a pivot in our company in 2018-19, because while we were doing all these things to address the potential disruption, we were also running our base business. And in our base business, which we were growing, on our truck leasing business, which as you know, back then was the largest part of the company, the way we were pricing our leases had always been relatively dependent on the used truck market. Because we buy these trucks, we lease them to a customer for 6 years, and I got to sell them after the 6 years. We take the risk on that. We had used a method for figuring out what that price was going to be in 6 years and building that into the lease. Kind of held us in good stead. Some years we did better, some years we did worse, but we were okay. Well, beginning in 2016, we went to an extended period of a downturn in the used truck market. There was just too many trucks in the market. And that thing had never lasted this long. It lasted for about 3-4 years. During that time, it put a lot of pressure on our earnings of our company. And we made a decision in 2018-19 that we needed to do things differently. And we said, we're going to de-risk that business. We're going to lower that assumption going forward so that we're not so reliant on that final used truck price. And really, we're going to make the money on all the services that we provide. We maintain that truck all those years. If you're broken down, we wake up in the middle of the night to go get you on the road. All this important stuff we do, we want to get paid for that. And we got to find ways to make that business also a better return for our shareholders, because it really, for all the risk they were taking, we're getting the right return. And that's when we also made the decision to accelerate the growth in all these more asset-light, dedicated, and supply chain business. If I had to do it over again, I would have done that sooner in the process. But ultimately, I think it's been a journey. Just like for all of the, for the 93 years of Ryder, every chapter we've gone through, we've learned something and we've pivoted and done something differently. So I think as we write this chapter, we're ending up in a very good spot. We're ending up in a spot we have a very profitable, growing truck leasing and rental business. And then we also have a very profitable, growing, value-added services businesses dedicated in our supply chain area.
Outside of work, I know you're on the board of trustees from the University of Miami, so you're a proud alum of the U. Congratulations. Yeah, you got the U up. Congratulations on an amazing season. You're so close there. Almost got it, but even so, very, very impressive. What advice, if you were speaking to the graduating class about how to have a successful career like yours, what advice would you give to a 22-year-old graduating college today?
Well, look, I think there's three things that I always give to kids that are starting or folks that are starting in their careers. Number one, the world is full of problem identifiers. There's a small number of people that create the problem. There's a very large number of people that identify the problem. And then there's another very small number of people who actually solve the problem. If you can manage to become a problem solver, you are going to be needed in any business. You are going to be employed for life, because there aren't that many. And I think as I think of my first 20 years before I became the CEO, I had 16 different jobs. And every one of those jobs I was put in after the first couple because there was a problem. And they knew that I could find a way somehow. I wouldn't necessarily come up with the answer myself, but I'll find the people that can come up with the answer to solve the problem. So being a problem solver, I think, is an important, really important attribute that folks should look to have. The second one we just talked about, time management. If you want to be balanced and happy in your life, learn to manage your time. Because if you learn to manage your time, you'll be able to be successful in your career and also successful in your personal life. And I think being successful in personal life is just as important. So clearly, being a good time manager is important. And then the last one, which is really what we build the culture at Ryder on, is really being trustworthy, is doing the things that are going to make you a trustworthy person. Always doing the right thing even when no one's looking. Having good judgment, which means it isn't only, not only is what's best for you, but what's best for the client, what's best for the company. Treating people with respect. Those are things that people remember, how you treated them. So, one of the things that we talk a lot about Ryder is that every employee has a right to be treated with respect. And that's how we expect people to manage. So building that trustworthiness as a person, I think, will allow you to be successful in your career as you grow. So those are the three things that I always I always recommend for folks that are getting started is, you've already gone to school, you've already learned things. Now, how do I put them in practice?
Yeah, that's a great lineup. And obviously, Frank and Covey. So Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits. His son, Stephen M.R. Covey, wrote Leading at the Speed of Trust. And that's obviously a topic that we care a lot about and think a lot about as well. So I'm glad to hear that is on your top 3 pieces of advice. So you're coming to the end of your tenure, as I said earlier. What's next for you?
Well, I am either going to become a much better golfer, or I'm going to have to come to realization that I'm very uncoordinated, because I would like to improve my golf game. I love to fish, living down here in South Florida, so expect to spend some time fishing, expect to spend some time traveling with my wife. As on these jobs, you don't always get a lot of time to do those things. So I want to do that, spend time with the family, and then always obviously keep an eye on Ryder. I love this company. It's been so fortunate to have ended up here, again, because my wife wanted to live in South Florida, so she's made it clear that I should just always listen to her because good things happen. But yeah, that's it. That's the plan. I certainly don't have expectations of getting back into the business world or taking on a role like this anywhere else.
Sounds great. So our traditional closing question. Frank & Covey is a leadership company. So we always ask, who is a great leader that you have worked with before? And what lesson can we all learn from them?
Well, I would tell you, there's somebody that I worked for many years, who was an executive here at Ryder. And what I learned from him, which I think had a big impact in my career, was passion for the business. This gentleman cared deeply about the company, almost an obsession. Now, I can't say I've gone as far as an obsession, but wherever you go to work, I think it is important to care deeply about whatever it is that you're working on. And I think that, as a leader, becomes contagious. People see that you're very interested and you care and you're obsessed with trying to make your customers better and try to improve your services and your products. And that was something that I learned from this gentleman who I worked for many years. And I think it's something that in any business that you get into, whatever it is you end up doing in life, developing a passion for what you're doing is important. Because everybody always says, well, follow your passion. Well, I got to tell you, working in truck leasing and logistics was not a passion of mine growing up. But I came to Ryder and it became my passion. And it became something that I care deeply about, and I care deeply about doing a good job for our customers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your lessons and insights today. It's fascinating to hear about the strategic direction and evolution at Ryder over time. Fascinating to hear your lessons and advice on culture and leadership. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Will, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. To all of our listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Please find someone in your life that you could share it with, that you think would benefit from these great insights, and hope you join us next week for another episode of Frank & Covey on Leadership.